Good morning.
Hey, David. Hello. How are you? Marianne
Oh,
Welchel here.
good morning. It's good to see you, Marianne. Always great to connect and do a webinar with you.
I know I think we've got a great session today for those that are joining us. Everyone, will give you just maybe another 30 seconds to get things settled, maybe grab a pen and paper, whatever you might need to take a few notes, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, you bet. Of course, I know I always need my coffee, and it's raining and doing all kinds of crazy weather throughout the country today. So wherever you're logging in from or connecting with us from, we hope you're dry and safe, and you've got a hot cup of coffee or tea or what have you, so you can settle in and join us for a great session.
Yeah, very good. So David, why don't we go ahead and get started? Why don't you tell folks just a little bit about who you are and what you do for Psychological Associates?
Yeah, you bet. So I'm David Rowan. I'm a psychologist by training and a consultant here at Psychological Associates, and we do all kinds of things when it comes to talent management. We assist with talent selection and leadership development, succession planning, all those things. Marianne,
Yeah,
you want to say a little bit about yourself?
sure. Thank you, David. I am the principal consultant with the Delta Learning Group based out of the Indianapolis area. Have a really long history with Psychological Associates, introduced to their products quite a bit ago in my HR career working for a big pharma company, and have continued that relationship. Really found it very valuable in the different roles I've had in organizations in human resources and leadership development. And now pleased to be working along with David and others from the group to present things like this valuable session today.
Absolutely.
David, let's do just a quick technology check. We all know sometimes that's a little challenging for people, although many people are becoming so much more comfortable with Zoom and all of that since our pandemic. First thing I do want to make note of, a lot of people ask this question. We will be distributing a recording of this webinar on Monday. So if you're anxious to maybe re-listen to a piece of it, that recording will be coming to you via email on Monday. Please make sure that when you do converse with us, we've got everybody on mute. Please use the chat, and also make sure that you are responding to everyone, not just the panelists, because people will want to see the question or look at the comment that you've made. It may be something that's on their mind as well. David and I will make every effort to try to respond to you during this session. We'll be watching the chat and responding. If for some reason we run out of time, or maybe it's a little bit more personal question, you're very welcome to contact us by email, and we'll respond that way. So let's do a quick technology check. If you will, please go ahead and type in your name, your company, and your location in the chat. That just gives us an opportunity to make sure everything is working. Hey, Meg, thank you. Glad you're with us from St. Louis.
Yeah. Hey, Amanda from St. Louis as well. Awesome.
Yeah, Jane, thank you from Tennessee. Oh gosh, they're flashing very fast. We've got
Yeah, I know we've
St.
got,
Louis. Oh, I saw somebody from Fort Lauderdale and somebody from New Mexico. That's fabulous.
and we've got New
Thank you
York.
so much.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great from all over. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Oh, Miami, and I'm a little jealous of our Florida people.
I know. I saw a Fort Lauderdale roll by
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, yeah,
And
fantastic.
hi,
Atlanta,
Matt from Atlanta. I bet you're enjoying some nice weather as well.
awesome. Well, it looks like the technology is working, so let's keep on moving forward. We want to make today, we want to talk about two different things. We want to make the case that intentional and well-planned retention conversations are just a good business practice. Additionally, we want to talk about specific skills that you can learn and use so that your retention conversations have the impact you desire, namely keeping great people on your team. Those are our two keys for today.
Mhm.
Marianne?
So yeah, so it's always good, I think, as facilitators, for us to have a little bit of sense of what's on your mind. You know, it goes without saying that the COVID pandemic has had a profound effect on everybody, personal and business wise. And but from a retention perspective, I'd like you to take just a minute and think about what's been the biggest burden for you as a leader. And thank you. We already see some people jumping in with some comments there. What is it that's been a great burden for you related to retention? And we'll see if we can't touch upon that. David, I saw one come through about wages not being competitive. And I think that has certainly been, and Kristen, oh my goodness, we hear so much about this in the news about people being really stressed out, burned out. I love Meg's comment too, recognition remotely. How difficult is that one, David?
Yeah. This is great information, and we're actually going to be responding to some of this with the content that we already have planned. So it's almost like you guys knew what we were going to be talking about, right? We're talking about things like motivation, right? When you can't necessarily change wages, what do you do about that? And
right.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, there's I'm hearing a theme from a couple of people too about job security, kind of preemptive exiting. Thank you, Lynn Hayes. We appreciate that as well. Apprehension about returning. That's a critical one as well. So thank you everybody for playing along. We really appreciate that. It seems to me that I think a lot of people have realized that there is a pretty important need for having these types of conversations, but would like to just kind of reiterate that with a couple of stories as well as some comments from David. The pandemic has certainly turned our world upside down. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about a top performer. This is actually somebody that I tried to recruit for the company I was working at the time. We'll just call him Michael for the sake of things. A very, very skilled mechanical engineer, master's level, and put an offer out to him, and he turned it down and decided to go with his dream company. Worked for that company for 3+ years, I believe. Went on and joined another well-known company where he continued to move well or perform well, and moved up the ladder into a leadership role. And I think, as some of us would expect, the pandemic hits and like, oh my, people will probably just stay in place. Not this individual. In July of last year, he uprooted his family, decided to move to a new company. I think it's proof that in the midst of change and challenge, retention is really still a top concern and something that plagues a lot of leaders. I also had a conversation with the CEO of a company that's in kind of recreation manufacturing and service here in Indiana. And he was super concerned about retaining two groups of employees, one salespeople and the second service technicians. And he said, if we don't have those, we don't have a business. So I think despite all of these sort of roller coaster effects, David, that we see, there's an acronym about out there, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, change, and ambiguity, really kind of describes 2020 and into 2021. Despite all of that, the market for top talent still seems to be really hot. And top performing employees really seem to be willing to take the chance and put themselves out there and change employers, even in times that we would consider to be of the utmost challenge. I know, David, you've got some thoughts too on some other factors that might contribute to that willingness of top talent to consider leaving their current employee.
Marianne, you're absolutely right. And everyone who's put something in the chat, acknowledges that there are a number of reasons why retention conversations might be important. And Marianne, your stories of the top talent and the concern that people still have mobility, right? And that just because there are things, the volatility in the market doesn't mean people necessarily want to hunker down. We all know that 2020 was a uniquely challenging year. And thankfully, as we look forward into 2021, I think we can see some light at the end of the tunnel, which everyone
Yes.
is very excited about. In an article from the Wall Street Journal recently, a number of prominent economists have been anticipating a strong recovery. And I think we've all seen that in the news. A pent-up desire to get out there and get back to life. So I think, and a lot of companies are talking about, people we talk to, folks are wanting to buckle up and be prepared for a very busy and productive year. So as leaders in HR and other areas of our business, this represents an opportunity to help people adopt what you might call a recovery mindset, meaning that we can be more optimistic, be more forward thinking, start thinking about talent strategy and business strategy in a different way. But having said that there's optimism, that there's hope, that there's recovery on the way, there are a few realities we also want to keep in mind. And Marianne, if you want to talk about those.
Yeah, absolutely, David. And go ahead and put up those realities. You nailed it right on the head. A very recent article that appears in the journal Human Resources Executive 2020. I mean, as you look at these statements, whether you're joining us from an HR perspective or you're a leader of direct reports for your organization, you may be feeling a little bit of sense of concern, maybe even alarm about some of your top talent. What if Amit or Siobhan or that one person in your group who's planning his or her exit strategy right now, what are you doing about it? How do you anticipate the potential exit, maybe get ahead of the curve a little bit, maybe change the course of that person's decision, so that you can perhaps retain that highly rated employee. Our hope, obviously, through this particular session is to encourage you to do that through a great retention-focused conversation. The discussions provide a forum for kind of digging in, finding those pain points, demonstrating empathy, and maybe coming up with a solution to whatever is causing the issues that maybe, kind of pushing people to look a little bit, so that you can develop a solution that'll encourage the employee to stay with your organization. Now, David, we know that, these seem a little dim, as you rightly pointed out on the slide, but there are some bright points, aren't there, about the recovery?
No, you're absolutely right. And Marianne, you brought up the point earlier that there's been a lot of volatility and we've seen extremes, right? We've seen some extreme bad news and we've also seen some really good news, some really promising news. So, of course, there's a bright side. As you think about this last year, I imagine you could say, for example, you're closer to some of your teammates than you've ever been. Sometimes going through difficult and challenging times and overcoming significant barriers can bond people together. And I think that's important to recognize. And there may be opportunities in some of those retention conversations to highlight the reality of what you've been through as a team, as a group. You may also have had some innovation happen. I know that we had a lot of innovation at Psych Associates over this last year. It sparked us to put some of our content online in new ways. Even things like this webinar, for example. If not for COVID, I'm not sure that we would be sitting here today and using this opportunity or this technology to connect with people and share information. So I think that if you've not done so already, you're probably anticipating getting back into the rhythm of in-person meetings and spontaneous conversations in the hallway that spark some energy and broaden the scope of your impact. And so, with a lens on both the challenges we face, right? We don't want to be Pollyanna and just have rose-colored glasses, but also with some optimism about the opportunities ahead. Let's keep on taking a closer look at the importance of these retention conversations.
Yeah, so next, David, what we'd like to give everyone on the webinar an opportunity to do is to listen to one of those conversations with just a little bit of a twist. I'll share with you right up front. This is not a great example of a retention conversation. What we'd like you to do, though, is to focus on what you're hearing and then use the chat feature to share a word, maybe a phrase about the conversation, about the leader's impact on the employee. And that could be, maybe there is something that you feel the leader is doing well, or maybe, perhaps a little bit ineffective. Go ahead and share that with us via the chat. If you're familiar with the dimensional model, maybe you've been through training before and you know the quadrants, go ahead and comment as you will. If you're not familiar with it, don't worry about it. David's going to do a quick review with that. So with that said, we're going to turn it over to our very talented leader and direct report and let them go ahead and just share a little bit of, maybe not so great conversation.
Yeah, and it'll be a little fun.
Hey, Clay, everything okay today?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm working on the analysis of the inventory shortage we had last week. As we all know, we had 2 suppliers who failed to deliver. One shipment was late by 2 days, and the other supplier shorted us by 2 pallets. I'm trying to figure out why, as well as investigate the possibility of identifying some new suppliers.
Great. Supply chain shortages create some of the biggest headaches for us. These scarcities are happening not only in your department, but all over the place. We have to get to solutions fast. I need a second to chat about something else, though.
Okay, what's up?
Well, I'm sure you've heard that Naomi has been involved in the latest HR project, retention. Side comment here, doesn't HR have anything else to do? I could offer up about 10 real problems they could tackle, but of course, they never come to us on the front lines, now do they? Okay, venting over for the time being. Naomi has asked her managers to touch base with all of our direct reports, so I'm checking in with you on this so-called retention issue. Sorry, more venting. You would think that HR would realize we have critical things to work on here, like shortages of valuable commodities, things we need to run this organization. But I'm not going to cross Naomi or HR. I'll do my due diligence and have the conversation. So here we go, retention. You're hanging in with us, right? I mean, you've gotten a chance to work on key projects, even connecting with our VP of operations. For a guy who's only been here less than 5 years, that's more than what someone of my talents was able to do. I guess I should be jealous, huh? And let's not forget the opportunity I gave you last year to travel to India to work with our newest offshore supplier. You talked about how much you enjoyed getting immersed in the Indian culture, as well as doing some sightseeing in New Delhi. I should have taken that trip myself, but I thought you could handle it okay. And of course you did, with a little boost from me. So anyway, back to the question. You're not thinking about going anywhere, are you?
Well, I have enjoyed my project work, and it was great to have the chance to hear more about new supplier identification and development strategy from our VP during the project that involved him. And you're right, I really enjoyed my trip to India. However, there are some things.
That's great, Clay. I was pretty sure I knew where you stood. Look, I've got to run. I'll catch you soon. Call or text when you get the info we need on those solutions for our shortages. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Hey, wow, David, I think Craig was able to, I saw him as being the first chat in there. Old Jessica was doing all of the talking. Kristen tagged that as well, a really bad listener. Poor Clay didn't even have a question to hardly respond to. I think maybe there was one or so. What about the rest of you? Let's hear from others on there. I like this one, David, because this sometimes happens. Jessica's not taking ownership of the initiative. We see that divide oftentimes in organizations.
And
what do you think, David?
some people may say, oh my gosh, no, the conversations like that don't really happen. That was so exaggerated. We were having a little bit of fun. But, take a moment and think about it. I mean, how often have you seen a manager find out an initiative is happening, and instead of embracing it, they get grumpy about it and they complain and they have
Mhm.
these little side conversations, and then when they sit down to have that retention conversation, it's not authentic. Now we took not authentic to the next level. And Jessica, by the way, great job with your acting skills there. She's got some real chops. But we all know what an inauthentic question sounds like, or when a person's just disengaged or disinterested.
Yeah. And the photos of Jessica, of course, were selected carefully to reflect that. But we've seen that rolling of eyes,
Yeah.
Maybe the kind of the emotional distancing, not really paying attention to what was being said and so forth.
Yeah.
I like this. Jessica told him everything she had done for him and compared it to her own successes. Yeah, it's really all just about me. So great, everyone. Thank you so much for that. Again, it was a little bit of a tee up. We do acknowledge that, but it's, I think it's really important to think about how can we use the psychological associate tools that are available to us to really have a great retention conversation. So David's going to talk a little bit, just as a quick refresher, about the dimensional model of behavior. David?
Yeah, I imagine most of you, or many of you, are familiar with the dimensional model. The model is at the heart of everything we do at Psych Associates. For those who are new, or for those who don't work with it every day as we do, I'll just provide a quick refresher here. So the model is based on two axes, or continuum. The vertical line represents the task continuum. And the higher you go on the task continuum, the more your behaviors are proactive and oriented towards making things happen. And the lower you go on the task continuum, the more your behaviors are reactive and letting things happen. Next is the horizontal axis. This is the people continuum. The farther to the left you go, the more your behaviors show a lack of regard for others. The farther to the right you go, the more your behaviors show high regard for others. Mm-hmm. And of course, the two axes create the familiar four quadrants. In the upper left, you see Q1 behaviors. And that's a tell and do style of leadership. I tell, you do, right? Not super motivating. In the lower left, we see the Q2 behaviors, which can be avoidant and passive. Kind of the company line. That's that inauthenticity we were talking about that we saw a little bit of from Jessica. Next, we see in the lower right-hand corner some Q3 behaviors, which favor socializing and avoiding conflict, seeking harmony rather than pressing for results. And I would say we probably saw a little bit of Q3 in Jessica when she got a little sidetracked into talking about having fun in India, right? And then finally, in the upper right-hand corner, we have the Q4 behaviors. Now, this is a leader who balances being proactive and making things happen with treating others with high regard. They involve and challenge people and gain true commitment, not just compliance. Now, we want to emphasize that this is a behavioral model. All of us have used each of the four behavior types at different times. Now, motivation plays a large role in motivating which behaviors we exhibit. So let's take a minute to talk a little bit about motivation as well. Psychologists organize motivators into two broad categories. The first are external to the person. We call these tangible benefits. And we see every day that people's behaviors change because of external tangible benefits. For example, when it's 5 p.m. on a Tuesday, and you still have a bit more work to do, you might opt to put in the discretionary effort it will take to get the job done if you know there could be a raise or bonus or maybe an extra day off in return for your dedication and your extra work. Now, while these motivators are powerful, they've got some limitations. As leaders, we have limited resources, and we can't just keep giving bonuses and raises and days off to people. Additionally, while a bonus can boost effort in the short term, you've got to be careful. People may start to expect a bonus for every little thing they do. Now, luckily, there's another category of motivators, and it's very important as leaders and as we kind of think about retention conversations. One person noted earlier, oh my goodness, salary restrictions, and we only have so much in terms of what we can compensate people in terms of the total compensation package, and we don't have unlimited resources. So we have to think about intangible benefits. Now, intangible benefits refer to the feelings you get from the work you do and the actions you take. Take the same situation I noted above. It's 5 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I've got some extra work to do. What am I going to do? Well, imagine that I've got a connection to the project. Perhaps I'm enjoying learning something new because my boss gave me a cool assignment. Or maybe I know I'm delivering something for a coworker of mine and I don't want to let them down. I have a connection to my team. Or maybe I get satisfaction from meeting goals and knowing that I delivered on time. If my boss has talked to me and helped me make a connection between the meaning of my work and my discretionary effort, you know, maybe I'm willing to make that true commitment. And that's again, that's that retention conversation thing, helping an employee, helping a person connect the dots between the meaning of their work and the purpose of their work and some intangible benefit elements. So think about yourself. Think about all the things you do to go above and beyond for your coworkers, your team, your employees, your boss. Why do you work so hard? I bet there's all kinds of intangible benefits that motivate your behavior every day. And I think as leaders, it's important that we have that kind of self-understanding and we see that what motivates us, and then we can use that to be empathetic with what might motivate others. Now, let's check in on this concept of motivation. Particularly, let's focus in on these intangible benefits a bit more.
Yeah, David, I'd like to challenge everybody on the call with this thought. David mentioned that we all come to work and stay with our employer for reasons above and beyond money. Obviously, we need the money, but there are other things that perhaps do motivate us. Maybe it's the visibility of the project, or maybe, as David mentioned, something that I'm going to learn a lot about, or I'm just super interested in, whatever it is. What I'd like you to do, though, is now turn your attention as a leader and think about one of your top performers. We're not, obviously, for confidentiality reasons, going to ask you to identify who that person is or what they do. But what I do want you to think about is what drives him or her to really produce top work. What is it that maybe makes that person on the Tuesday evening say, yep, I'm going to commit another couple hours to this particular project? And then what I'd like you to do is use the chat feature to share a word or phrase that you think describes that person's motivation. So we'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. And David, boy, they're already jumping in. I'm seeing learning opportunity. I'm seeing recognition from Kristen. Thank you very much.
And
Allison, thank you as well.
That's such a broad category. I mean, recognition could be everything from as simple as your boss stopping by your office and just giving you that acknowledgement, to something a bit more formal, an announcement at a team meeting, or even a formal process that HR does of a employee of the month, that kind of thing. So that there's all kinds of opportunities there.
Yeah, I've just seen a couple other things, David, that have come through.
Mm-hmm.
Caring for the team and customer led. So really thinking about others, whether that's our own internal team or maybe the customer, internal customer or external customer that we may be providing work for, wanting to provide them with a just absolute top notch in terms of work product for that.
Yeah, I love
Any others, David, that you'd like to comment on?
Yeah, Marianne. So the growth and challenge one, I mean, I think all of us approach, different elements of our work with a different amount of enthusiasm, but sometimes we've got that assignment that we're connected to. And we think, oh, this is awesome. This is something I love to do. It's in an area where I've got an opportunity to learn. And it's a little bit of a stretch. It's a little beyond where I am now. And just like that person who is, a musician trying to learn that new song, or the athlete trying to improve their time on the 5K race, just that challenge to say, hey, can I do a little bit better this time around? That could be very motivating for someone. And a leader who's really attuned to their direct reports and understands what represents a challenge to them can do a great service both to that employee and to the whole team by setting them up with that challenging assignment.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of challenges, though, David, people, employees don't walk in with their intangible benefits tattooed on their forehead. Nobody says, hey, man, I really like learning opportunities, learning new things, or, I really like to get out in front of the top executives, or I want to do everything I can for my customers. And so one of the things about the dimensional model that I have always appreciated as a practitioner is that it's not only a descriptive model, helping us to understand behavior, but it is also, I would call it prescriptive. We can use it to really better understand something that isn't perhaps readily apparent, like motivation.
Yeah, no, that's an absolutely great point, Marianne, and well, you really set the table for me. So
I
not
know I
only
did. I just teed you up, David.
that's why you're a great partner, Marianne. So not only did doctors Lefton and Bezada create the dimensional model, but they also had a remarkable insight. They realized that you could map motivators, intrinsic motivators, onto the model. And that when you do this, you have this great tool for understanding what drives the behaviors you're seeing every day. And you can use it kind of like a Rosetta Stone, if you will, right? You can say, well, I see Q1 behaviors. Well, this is what might be driving those behaviors. For example, with Q1 behaviors, a lot of times those behaviors are motivated by a need for independence and being held in regard and esteem by others. So if you can help speak to those intangible benefits, you can really connect with that person and get them to increase their motivation. And with Q2 behaviors, if you see those behaviors, that person might be in that moment, might be motivated by security and stability, a desire for those things in the workplace. So you can know that you might want to point those out to the individual in that moment. Now, with Q3 behaviors, there's likely a need for social connection and what we sometimes call belongingness, as well as social harmony. I think we've all felt that at some moments in our life where we wanted to be a member of the team, a member of the group. We wanted to have that special connection with other people. I know during COVID, it's been hard to get that. And so we've done Zoom meetings and other things to make those connections. And then, finally, in the upper right corner with the Q4 behaviors, think about those intrinsic motivators for self-realization. And then there's this other concept of interdependence. And whereas someone maybe with those Q1 behaviors is thinking more about how can I excel in my career and how can I continue to grow and what are my next opportunities, the person who's showing a lot of Q4 behaviors might appreciate the concept, the motivator of how can we all grow? How can my efforts grow the whole team? How can my efforts serve our customers better? How can my efforts drive our mission forward? And so it's a win-win kind of mindset. And when you can set up through questions and conversations a linkage between those intrinsic motivators and the actions and behaviors of the workplace, you can really spark some great things for folks. So now that
David, before we leave this,
Yeah.
Let me just pose this question to you because it's one that's come up, I think, quite frequently in discussions around motivation. And that, if I am as a leader pointing out, how perhaps a project might give someone who demonstrates a lot of Q1 behavior, maybe more independence, or they might in fact, feel a greater sense of self-esteem, aren't I just reinforcing those behaviors?
That is such a great question, Marianne. I'm really glad you brought that up. So I think the first thing it's important to remember is that all of us have a variety of needs. and that those needs drive different kinds of behaviors. And all of us have a primary cue style, right? A style we kind of default to. And then we all also have a secondary cue behavior style that we can go into. So even if you're seeing some Q1 behaviors from a person on a given day that might be sparked by a need for esteem or a need for independence, once those needs have been met, right, the person is opened up to then think about other needs they have, right? Once you can kind of think of it, if you go way back to your days of Psychology 101 and Maslow and the hierarchy of needs, one of the original ideas back then was once you kind of satisfy what you might call a lower order need, it frees you up to go after a higher order need.
Mhm.
And so, gosh, once you've freed the need for security and stability, if you're using some Q2 behaviors, you might go, okay, I'm stable and I'm secure. Now I can go after mastery and interdependence and self-realization. So
Mhm.
by accomplishing and meeting the needs outside of the Q4 zone, you can free a person up and allow them to move into a more collaborative, cooperative, collegial kind of a more win-win, we kind of approach as opposed to an I approach. Well, Marianne, if you have other thoughts about that too.
Yeah, David, no, I think you've really reinforced a point. I think that's a critical question on a lot of leaders' minds. I don't want to reinforce the wrong behavior, but I think your point is well taken, is that the need has to be satisfied. And so therefore, by calling attention to how a particular assignment or whatever might in fact provide a greater sense of job security, some predictability, reduce stress, reduce, the constancy of change in someone's role, that may in fact, satisfy that need and then allow them, to pursue bigger and better things, Q4 behavior that really does provide, a greater contribution both to themselves professionally as well as to the organization. So thank you. I just wanted to raise that because that's probably the most frequent question I ever hear when we talk about motivation.
Yeah, no, that is a great question, and I think particularly applicable to this retention conversation piece, of course, because you are thinking, not only do you want to link people in a closer way to your organization, but you want to encourage their best self, right? So you might be a little anxious of, oh gosh, if I'm reinforcing their Q1 behaviors, have I encouraged their best self? But I think in many ways you have, because as you said, once one need is met, it frees us up to pursue the other. Yeah.
Yeah. So David, let's talk about then, what's the plan for the conversation? And again, Psychological Associates has provided such a great tool to have that conversation. For those of you familiar with the Psychological Associates work, that it's the 5-step format. For those of you not familiar, I'll just do a quick review, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper in terms of how this in fact can be used for the retention conversation. The 5-step format is really the antithesis of the conversation that we heard between Jessica and Clay before. Because first of all, you absolutely want to, really establish a sense of rapport and ensure that the person is ready, willing, and able to talk with you at that moment about whatever topic. Obviously, Jessica, kind of stubbed her toe a little bit on that because, we just jumped into, here it is, and I'm going to vent about Naomi and HR and so forth. So, step one is really critical to setting up a stage to having a conversation that does truly matter and is worthwhile. The next step in the 5-step format, and again, this is a challenge for a lot of us because we like to do the talking. We saw that with Jessica that, oh yeah, I'm just going to tell you how I feel about it and, make some assumptions about how you feel and so forth. Instead, what the 5-step format does is suggest that, maybe we should just really focus on asking great questions. Let's see if we can tease out what the other person is thinking by really having a good plan for topics that we need more information on, questions that we want to ask, perspectives that we want to pursue and explore a little bit more before step 3, which is where we're going to share our own views. With step 3, a lot of leaders like to talk a lot. And this is a step where we really want to be very, very focused in our comments. This is not the time to unveil the laundry list of 17 points I needed to share with you. It's, here's what I'm thinking in reaction to what you've said. Concise, really focused points that you're going to make. Then in step 4, there's an assumption that, maybe the other person agrees with you, or maybe they don't. But as a leader, it's your job to kind of explore and figure that out. So step 4, again, involves asking some good questions and really thinking about, what is the other person now thinking in terms of a reaction to what I've just said. So, has that changed their viewpoint? What's their perspective now? And then step 5 is, in fact, okay, what are our next steps? And we have found that next steps are often facilitated versus dictated. And what I mean by that is that rather than presenting the list of, okay, here's what you need to do next, step 1, 2, and 3, asking the question, well, where do we go from here? What do you think are the key steps that might be taken for this particular project? Or, in the case of the conversation, with Jessica and Clay, really thinking about, well, you mentioned that you were concerned about the amount of hours that you were working and how that took away from your family life. What are your thoughts on how we might deal with that? So, really, asking the direct report, asking the employee to come up with some ideas, because chances are likely they've got that solution in their head anyway. They're thinking about it. That doesn't mean that you couldn't add in a few things or express your perspective about it, but it does, I think, work better, and it's more likely to be acted upon if, in fact, the employee comes up with that. So, David, we want to really, again, focus a lot on this whole element of questions, because that is a kind of a trouble spot, I think, for a lot of leaders is, how do I pull off a good step 2? First of all, what questions do I ask, and how do I formulate them? How do I put them together in words in a way that really is going to generate that good conversation? So we'd like to get you to think about, again, that top performer in your team, in your group, and imagine if, in fact, you were having a retention conversation with us, what question would you ask them? And then just go ahead and type that in the chat for us. We'll give you a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds rather, to think about that. What question, again, would you ask the top performer if, in fact, you were in a conversation with them about retention?
And as a tip, you can go, scroll back up in the chat and look at, what were those intrinsic motivators, and what were some of those retention challenges, and that can be a spark to generate some ideas about the questions you might want to ask.
Yeah. Kristen gets our virtual free cup of coffee prize, David, because she was the first one I saw. What aspects of the job do you find most gratifying? Love it, because then okay, maybe I need to go search out some additional projects that have similar themes, are constructed in the same way as that project. Rob, what talents or skills would you like to use more of? I love this one from Lynn too. What do you think our next big thing is? So again, getting back to the organization, not just that. Amanda, your question is so solid. What motivates you? So many leaders are afraid to ask that question. And there's nothing wrong with just coming right out and saying, hey, what is it that really provides you with a sense of satisfaction that really is gratifying for you? David, is there one that you've seen that's popped up?
Not that's popped up here, but one that I think is a direction people might want to go in, which is to ask them, how does your work connect with our overall mission? And
Mhm.
you feel a sense of purpose in that link between what it is that we do, what we're trying to accomplish in the world, and how, what you get to do with your job. Because I think making that connection to that big why, why we're
Mhm.
here, what's our purpose, can be really inspiring for folks.
Yeah. David, we'll wrap this up with Carl's question, which is a question I think that takes a lot of personal courage from a leader or an HR professional to ask, and that is, what's the one thing that might cause you to think about leaving? Sometimes it's, we don't want to hear it, and so therefore we don't ask it. But it's so critical to find out, because maybe that's the prevention strategy that you could develop as a leader. What can I do to forestall that thing that's going to drive somebody out from actually happening? David, we've got some questions that we think might be kind of useful to share with people on the next slide. You teed up the first bucket up there nicely. Is, people do need to feel that connection to the organization. And so giving them an opportunity to help them see the thread between the work that they do, what's the connector between what they do and the bigger picture, I think is something that in fact can reinforce the need to, hey, we really value you and we want you to stick around. Also getting their views on, what are some changes that we should be thinking about making. I kind of built this as a little bit of a funnel. So taking from the organization and then narrowing the scope a little bit more to their particular role and the team. And we had several people, kind of jump in with questions about this, what's gratifying, what gets you going. And, just asking them, hey, what are the best and the worst things that are going on, right now in our team? And then last but not least, and this is, again, takes a heavy dose of personal courage, and that is to ask directly about your leadership capabilities. How have I helped you from a personal and professional goals perspective? And, what should I be doing more or less of, the same, in terms of the way that you need to be led? Again, that does take a little bit of oomph from you to ask that particular question, but you will never know, maybe until you read the exit survey that your organization does, that you didn't do as much or you did too much of whatever it happens to be to hold on to that really top performer. David, any other thoughts there?
Marianne, you mentioned that some of those questions at the bottom, me as your leader, take a little bit of courage. Well, they take courage in part because you have to be willing not just to hear what they have to say, but to react to it. And you have to be willing to actually do something, So I think there is the subtext of all of this is that there could be a call to action here. And when you have that retention conversation, you want to be able to be frank with what you can do, what you can commit yourself to do. I think maybe one thing that a reason people might feel shy to ask some questions is to go, well, gosh, if I ask the question, well, then the person answers the question.
Yeah.
Then what if I don't do anything about it? Well, then where are we?
Right. Yeah, we're kind of boxed in a corner a little bit. So
Yeah.
well,
I
as
think
we finish off this particular slide,
yeah.
I just want to really, really emphasize again the importance not just of the question that you ask, but the how you ask it, and what happens after the question. So many leaders that I've worked with have great ideas in terms of topics, but they struggle a little bit in terms of asking in an open-ended manner. So instead of looking for that just a collection of information, they'll say something, well, do you do that the same way every time? And the person's going to say no. and that's not going to get them a lot of information. So really thinking about the way that you phrase the question, asking it in an open-ended manner is important. And then summarizing after you've asked a couple of questions so the person knows that you truly are listening. Summary statement, very easy to do. If I heard you correctly, you said A and B. Did I get that right? And David, you'd come back to me and say, yeah, but I also said C. And I'm like, oh yeah, oh, sorry about that. I didn't mention that. So it's a great listening check, I think, for that. So, those are things that I think that you can learn more about in the resources that we've put together for you. And as this session comes to a close, David and I wanted to share a few of those with you. If you'll take a look on the left-hand side, there are a couple of things that I just found to be really, really valuable. The first two are books. First one, A More Beautiful Question, really focuses in on, what the question is and how it should be phrased. So if that's something that you think, I could be a little bit better at, maybe that book is quite useful for you. Leadership Through People Skills. I will be honest. I am now on my third copy of this book because I've used it so much that literally it became so dog-eared I was embarrassed to take it with me. Little torn pages here and there because I'd flipped through it so much and so forth. It is the foundational work of Drs. Lefton and Lozada, and something that I think everybody should read and refer to, much like you would a dictionary. We've also put on that article from Human Resources Executive if you wanted to dig into that a little bit more. Middle column, I'm a YouTube fan, so I'm always, kind of scrolling around, and there are a couple of very short things, a couple of videos out there that I thought were useful. The first one is from the Pennsylvania CPA organization. The second one really focuses on motivation. So we thought those would be useful for you. David, why don't you talk a little bit more about some of the resources that Psychological Associates offers?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, today we laid out the case for the business case for why it's so important to have these retention conversations now in particular. And we've also talked about some ideas and some techniques, how to use the dimensional model to understand people's behavior, how to make sure you're using your Q4 behaviors, the 5-step format conversation, and really highlighting the role of questions, active listening, and Marianne, like as you said, using those summary statements, which I have found an invaluable tool, communication tool that I think we could all use a little bit more often. So we've given you some ideas and techniques, but you know what? We have more. And so, this is a good place to start. And people may be asking, gosh, okay, so that's good. I know a little bit about how to have a conversation, but what about with my whole organization? Or, what about other leaders who didn't get a chance to attend today's webinar? Well, we've got a toolbox at Psychological Associates of a number of different solutions that could be helpful with retention conversations and beyond. You may be thinking, how do I build a Q4 culture at my company? Well, we have tools for that. You may be thinking, well, what about succession planning? It's great that I've retained my top employees, but if a lot of people stay at my company, and there's not a next promotion for them, what do we do? What do we do now? So developing succession plans can be just a really important element of retaining top employees. And we have tools for that, leadership development classes for honing those Q4 skills, better understanding exactly how to execute those skills on a day-to-day basis. So we just invite you to reach out to us. and learn more about all of those different options that we offer. You do see here a couple mentioned, a couple specific solutions. One is the Q4 Edge, which is our online course for learning the Q4 skills in the 5-step format and great people leadership skills. Another one is Coaching for Workplace Impact, which gives you a framework for how to approach coaching. So you, again, can help all of your employees maximize their impact and be their best self at work. So lots of different options. Well, boy, it's been a great discussion today, Marianne. We're coming to the end here, just a few minutes before. As Marianne mentioned at the beginning, we will be taking this recording and sending it out to everyone. And we just want to thank you so much for attending. Thanks for taking an hour of your day to join with us and talk about great leadership and retention.
Yeah, David, let's give a shout out to our psychological associates colleagues, Jessica Lefton and Clay Hildebrand. Those were the voices behind that not so great retention conversation that we had. Also with us today, managing the technology and making sure everything was working well, is Jeff Lefton from Psychological Associates. So thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Clay, for helping us really have a great discussion, I think, on this particular topic. I'd like to thank all our participants too, because we had some great, interesting ideas that popped up. I invite you to contact us via email. If you still have, you get back this afternoon and you're thinking, that question, please feel free to go ahead and email us. Very easy to contact us. You can use the Q4 Solutions website and send an email via that way. And David and I will get back to you with the particulars of your question. So David, thank you. Anything else that you'd like to add?
No, Marianne, always great to see you. I'm glad that your Wi-Fi made it all the way through the rainstorms.
All the way through the rain.
and our Wi-Fi here made it all the way through the rainstorms too. So everybody stay safe and dry and be well. And I'm excited for 2021 and a busy year.
Yeah, me as well. Thank you again, everyone. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.